Lukashya Member of Parliament, Honorable Chisanga, thank you so much for joining us on this day today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor again to come back here and have this interview. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Indeed. Let's start off with talking about you showing solidarity to the Tonse Alliance presidential candidate, Brian Mundubile, since the law enforcers were knocking on his doors. One of the question marks that comes up is whether you have decided to choose him as a presidential candidate under the Tonse Alliance for the 2026 general election.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. As you may have realized, President Brian Mundubile is one of those from the Patriotic Front who had at an earlier opportunity to present themselves as a potential successor to President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. At that time, Dr. Lungu was still alive, but if you remember, he had retired from active politics, and he had suggested that he would like the succession to his office to be democratic. And Brian Mundubile was one of those who presented themselves, as a potential candidate or a possible candidate and leader of the Patriotic Front. This was way back in 2022, and of course he started canvassing from those days. There were several others that showed an interest to take over from President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. But with the events that unfolded, if you remember, there were a couple of spots of confusion within the Patriotic Front, starting with what Honorable Maiwa Sampa had done, with the party itself, and then what happened to the candidates themselves, which in the ingenuity that President Edgar Lungu utilized, we ended up forming first the UKA Alliance, and then subsequently the Tonse Alliance. But even in the Tonse Alliance, what President Lungu had tried to do was, as much as possible, was to transfer most of us senior leaders from the Patriotic Front into the Tonse Alliance, with the understanding that even if the European government, in collaboration with some of the members who had become turncoats within the Patriotic Front, would continue to frustrate the Patriotic Front, we would at least have a receptacle of a political organization through which we are going to continue canvassing and preparing ourselves for 2026 election. And that's why you saw most of us being appointed onto the Council of Leadership within the Tonse Alliance. Now, Tonse Alliance, as the name suggests, was an alliance of several number of political parties, amongst them NCP, FDD itself, and a few other organizations that are not even political parties, but those who are identified with the idea that was birthed by President Edgar Chagwa Lungu that we need a viable alternative political party or political grouping through which we can campaign to the Zambians to contest and definitely unseat the UPND. And this is how the leadership of Brian Mundubile came by. First, he was the leader of opposition in Parliament, as you recollect, until the UPND managed to frustrate the process of having an independent National Assembly by replacing Honorable Mundubile with their stooge in the name of Chavinga, thereby collapsing, Parliament. But Honorable Mundubile continued to lead the parliamentarians. And this is why you have seen that amongst the contenders who were first in the Patriotic Front and then later in the Tonse Alliance, Honorable Mundubile is the one who seems to have the support of many of the members of Parliament, that is those who have remained on the helm of the Patriotic Front, those who continue to champion the idea of Michael Sata and Edgar Chagwa Lungu. They have all decided this is a candidate that we would like to put our strength on, and we think that this is a candidate that we can sell very easily to the public, and this is why Honorable Mundubile becomes a leader. But in Tonse Alliance, you must recollect that leadership was contested. It wasn't like he was anointed, no. The only things that President Edgar Lungu did was to offer all of us positions within the Tonse Alliance. If you didn't have a specific position, he gave you at least a platform called the Council of Leaders, and this is where all of us are. But amongst those Council of Leaders, he also made certain appointments, which included, by the way, Vice President Given Luinda, also being a co-chair of the Tonse Alliance. But insofar as Honorable Mundubile was concerned, he was made in charge of parliamentary affairs together with State Councilor Chifumu Banda. And this is how then we decided, after the confusion in the PF started looking like it's boiling over, we felt we needed people to follow a leadership. And we said within the Tonse Alliance, we transitioned from the Patriotic Front to a group that Edgar Lungu had created himself, the ECL-PF movement, which was provided for even in the Tonse Alliance constitution. And we say this is the one that is now going to vie for leadership within the Tonse. And within that process, an election was called at which Brian Mundubile emerged victorious as the president of Tonse Alliance. This is how now he becomes the current Tonse Alliance president and the presidential candidate on the Tonse Alliance flagship. We are still collaborating with FDD. We are almost now concluding with our collaboration that will transition into us, allowing him to go and contest the next election, possibly on the FDD ticket.
I'd like to understand more about many of the Patriotic Front members having to follow Honorable Brian Mundubile and his leadership. One of the things that we have seen is there seems to be a lot of disorganization within the Patriotic Front. It seems like there are three bits of it. The side of Honorable Brian Mundubile, we have seen Robert Chavinga as well, and now we are seeing what is being called the PF Pamozi Alliance, which was recently formed. What do you make of this new alliance?
Well, to the contrary, I wouldn't call that what is happening in PF as the confusion. For me, it is actually a formation. Okay, you know, leadership has to emerge somehow. So the process we are going through is the one through which now the genuine leadership of the Patriotic Front is emerging. In fact, the members are now becoming more clear where they would like to be, especially after, you know, this convention that they recently had, which convention had no formative description, which convention had no idea whether you are electing a leader for the Patriotic Front or a leader for any other institution, or Pamozi Alliance as they called it, because if they are going to elect a leader for the Patriotic Front, they are going to fly straight into the teeth of contempt of court. Because if you remember, there's an injunction that is subsisting up to now that prevents the PF from mobilizing itself, including calling a convention. Right. But once this election went through and the results were announced, you have now seen that the members of Patriotic Front have become very clear where they would like to be. Okay, the majority of them, especially the structures of Patriotic Front, have resolved they would like to go with the ECL movement that has gone into Tonse, which is why you've seen a greater majority of the of the PF followers have gone to the Tonse Alliance. There are those who have remained with President Makebi Zulu, those who had been vouching for him even the time that we were going to have gone to a convention as the Patriotic Front itself. They have remained supporting Makebi Zulu. I don't think between these two, you can say there's another group that you can say is also providing leadership with the Patriotic Front. For me, I think that my younger brother Chavinga, who is a project of the UPND, has now gone beyond his use by debt. There is nothing that Chavinga can do now that can shake the foundation of the Patriotic Front. It's either you have it with the majority who are in Tonse Alliance and with another group that is forming, which has remained with Makebi Zulu. But I must say that for us, we are dreaming of an idea, of an ideal scenario where those who have gone with Makebi Zulu and those who have gone with Brian Mundubile will find it fitting very soon to get together, recreate leadership, and go through.
You think that's what's going to happen?
Well, there's nothing impossible in politics. I think if people are resolved to find a solution to a problem that is existing, I don't think there's anything impossible. In politics, even one day is sufficient. The only thing that worries me, sincerely speaking, is that we are dealing with a very ruthless regime in the name of the UPND, which is so determined to make sure that they crush everybody who is well-meaning within the opposition enclave. So that if they're not fighting Fred Membe or Harry Kalaba, they'll be fighting Brian Mundubile. If they're not fighting Brian Mundubile, they're fighting Makebi Zulu. This calls for an urgent need for these political organizations, to quickly get together and begin to speak one language and present to one formidable opposition grouping. Now, how that is done, I was just speaking to somebody right now before I came here who has heard me speak 3 times in the last 1 week that there's need for us to unite. Of course, we can't be dealing this willy-nilly without knowing that we're dealing with a determined enemy who doesn't believe in democracy. So in terms of the method and how we're going to work out this mechanism of bringing these opposition political parties together, we'll leave it to people that can be appointed to go and do that work. But in earnest, Zambians are calling for opposition unity, and I think that those who can lead this opposition unity are the ones who are within the Patriotic Front and Tonse Alliance enclave.
Right. One of the things that has continuously come up, obviously, is who is the leader of the Patriotic Front, and we've been able to see Robert Chavinga, him presenting documents that he claims are from the Registrar of Society, and he's been recognized as the sole leader of the Patriotic Front. What do you make of this documentation that he keeps posting on social media and talking about him being the leader of the party?
When I appeared on one of the radio stations recently, I said that unfortunately the events of our time in the last 4 years have led to the complete collapse of the Patriotic Front. And this has been caused mainly by external forces, ideally by the Republican president, driving the agenda through the UPND, driving the agenda through, Chisanga. That has been the major cause of the fallout of the Patriotic Front. But I dare say that even within the Patriotic Front itself, we have not worked in such a way that we would have a genuine unity. If we were united genuinely, we would not have caused the destruction of the Patriotic Front. If you're going to ask me now who the leader of the Patriotic Front is, I'll have difficulties answering that question. I can tell you that. The last person that I thought was the leader of the Patriotic Front was Edgar Chagwalungu, until he is passing on. Then, of course, the baton fell in the hands of my elder brother, Gimen Lubinda. He tried to put all of us together, but because of the nature of differences that then arose under the watch of Given Lubinda, we have now seen the final destruction of the Patriotic Front. You see, somebody has been saying Mr. Makebi Zulu is a president of the Patriotic Front. I would have difficulties, ascribing that leadership to him, because even the conference that they had, they didn't call it the Conference for the Patriotic Front. And this is with all respect. Yeah, this is all respect to my younger brother Makebi Zulu. That convention was not even a Pamosi Alliance convention. They just said they were having a convention. Whether they were having it as a Pamosi Alliance, I don't know. Whether they were having it at PF, I don't know. But the truth of the matter is that the PF currently remains the most crushed political organization. There is no determinate head of this organization, but it's got massive following. And the following is going in the direction depending on which one of the two people who are leading the two groupings is. If you are supporting Makebi, you can call yourselves the Patriotic Front of Makebi Zulu. If you are supporting Brian Mundubile, you can call yourself the PF of Brian Mundubile, although we would rather call ourselves the ECL PF movement, which has gone into the Tonsia land. So all these are causing the kinds of descriptive problems that you are seeing in the Patriotic Front, which is why I said earlier, I would rather that sooner rather than later, we find a way in which we can get together, have a very confidential meeting, deal with these matters, go to the head of what is causing, these descriptive problems with the Patriotic Front, even before we file nominations, so that we know how we're going to move on. But see, for us in Tonsia Alliance, we have resolved that we need to provide credible opposition to the UPND. I think not for lack of a better term, the enemy that we're looking at is the UPND and the misgovernance they have subjected this country to. And our thinking is that if we focus on trying to mobilize people around the Tonsia Alliance, of course, speaking as we are doing with the other opposition leaders, so that we can create one formidable organization. It would be better if we have one formidable organization, but if we can't have one, we are at a position where we're saying we are ready as Tonsia Alliance to face this regime in the next election. But of course, emphasizing that the better picture will be for us to unite as the opposition front. So there's no, you can't single out one person and say he's the leader of the Patriotic Front. It's very, very difficult. Because right now, Chisanga is claiming he's the president of the Patriotic Front. According to him, he's using the term Lugwalo. That is got Lugalo is the president of the Patriotic Front. There's a decision that has come out of the High Court recently, which I personally condemned because it doesn't reflect what was happening in court, where they declared that Mao Sampa is the president of the Patriotic Front. Now, Mao is the one who appointed Chisanga. Chisanga is still claiming to be president. Now, Makebi has come out of a convention, which even if it had no description, they have declared themselves as the president of Patriotic Front. So this is causing confusion in terms of perception of who really leads the Patriotic Front. But my take is that we should be able to sit down sooner or later. I do not think for a 1 minute that Chisanga is the president of Patriotic Front. No, I don't. Right. Okay? I do not even consider that Maos can be president of Patriotic Front. But because I'm a lawyer who respects decisions of the High Court, even if I don't agree with them, on that front, you would say, yes, Maos is the president of the Patriotic Front. But Makebi has come from a convention as well, in which they're calling themselves the president of the Patriotic Front. So this confusion can only be resolved if we sit together as people in one home and address these issues internally and come up with a position. I have come to the conclusion now that none of our courts here are prepared to give us the kind of justice that the PF genuinely deserves before the courts of law. I have no idea what is happening. I have no idea what is causing this. But quite frankly, when courts can deny you justice in broad daylight like we have seen recently, the best thing for you to do is to go and canvass in-house and come up with a position that you then can come and present to the public and say, the courts have denied us justice, but here is what we're going to do. And the followers are going to follow you, and they're going to know that you are prepared to offer credible opposition to the party that is in power.
Well, I'll continue that conversation with you shortly because I do want to press on. But let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we still have more coming up right here on this day.
No problem.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us on this day where we are hosting the Lukashya Member of Parliament, Honorable Chisanga, speaking more into what is currently happening within the Patriotic Front. Honorable Chisanga, I'd like to continue this conversation, and much earlier on you did indicate something very interesting,
Yes.
that the Patriotic Front has been hijacked by the current ruling UPND, and this is based off of what is currently happening with Robert Chavinga. But let me pick it up just from there.
Yes.
Robert Chavinga has since denied these claims that he is working with the UPND, as many have accused him of doing. What do you make of him declining these accusations?
I think I've conclusively discussed this matter in the media. From the very first time that Chavinga started working with His Excellency the President, I'll just briefly tell you what I have presented as a proof that there's a collaboration between the Republican President and what Chavinga is doing. Okay. Firstly, the time that Timao Sampa was having that conference of his, the only MP you saw there was Chavinga. There was nobody else. Now, under the PF Constitution, you must have all the MPs are part of the Electoral College when you're having a conference. So to try and give it some level of credibility that there were MPs at that conference, there was Chavinga and Mao Sampa as the only MPs who were there. But what is striking is what Chavinga said at that convention. He himself told the people that were there that he had just come from State House, where he had joined the president in welcoming the Tanzanian president to come and celebrate independence with us, but that he had been sent by the president to go to the conference or to the meeting that they were having to see what was going on, if everything was going according to plan. And according to him, he says, I'm satisfied that what people are doing here is according to plan. And he was even the first person to go and vote. That's the first item. The second item, when that conference was taking place, as an expected of any opposition convention, you saw how armed the police around Mulungushi Conference Center were. Now, it's only a government that is trying to connive with an element within the opposition front that can deploy such, an armory to a conference, okay? And the third thing, shortly after that, I think 1 or 2 days after that conference, the Republican president was reopening Kasama Airport. I was in Kasama myself, okay? But of course I didn't attend that event because I hadn't been invited. But at that event, the president was with Chavinga. Now, you have never seen Honorable Brian Mundubile at the same function with the Republican president, except in Parliament when it comes to address the nation. Why? Because we respect our distinct roles, okay? Brian Mundubile is leader of the opposition, which is within the legislature, which provides checks on the executive where the president sits at its head. It is very unexpected that you would be at the same place where the president is and you are there as leader of opposition. Not even leader of government business, the vice president. Not even government whip, who is a part of the UPND members of the legislature. But Chavinga, who had been but at that time had controversially been declared as leader of opposition, and the letter had arrived at Parliament to appoint him as leader of opposition. The first assignment he found himself carrying on was to accompany the president to Kasama to go and open that airport. And the president made this remark. He said, Maiche Okose, we are going to assist you. You've never heard anywhere within the Commonwealth where a sitting president is promising to assist a leader of opposition in carrying out the functions of the country. The leader of opposition is supposed to be the fiercest critic of the president. His responsibility is to give credible checks and balances to the president. Now, if you see that there's a meeting of minds between the leader of opposition and the president, just know that you have collapsed democracy, okay? Not only that, if you've seen most of the MPs who have been lined up to go and endorse President Daga and the Hichilema to attend open functions, public functions rather, by President Daga and the Hichilema, they have all been lined up by Chavinga as the opposition. And when there was now a problem between him and Miles, when Miles came to his senses and felt to have caused the problem to the Patriotic Front, which we need to rectify, the one who fought him fiercely was Chavinga, to the extent that he even went and grabbed, the party from Miles. The registrar of societies, we heard that the confusion that is taking place there now. You don't even know whose particulars are the registrar of societies. In disregard of what the law expects the registrar of societies to do, Chavinga is claiming to be the one who's on the list of office bearers. Quite frankly, I've never been bothered to see whether what Chavinga is telling us is the truth, because I'm so I'm so angry with how we have allowed the law to be walked on its head just because we want to satisfy some political egos of certain people. I am a lawyer. I'm a sworn advocate of the High Court. When I see that the law is being mutilated with impunity, I should be the first one to voice out the concern I've been voicing out. And I've been voicing out all these concerns, not because I don't like President Daga in the HDM. Frankly speaking, I know him as an individual. I've dealt with him even before they came into power. But what I have seen him do to the Constitution, what I have seen him do to the law, is what has raised these feelings of disgruntlement on my part. Because, as I argue all the time, if there's one person who has an onerous responsibility of making sure that the country is managed according to what is provided for in the Constitution and in the law, it is the President. There's even a provision to that effect in the Constitution. So when the President, who is lumbered with such a huge responsibility, begins to show traits of breaching the Constitution, of breaking the law with impunity, it worries me. Okay, because I know that I'm supposed to give him respect, but my worry is that if he destroys this country today, it is not only going to be for today, to be for the rest of the existence of the country, or at least until another president who will come and rectify the mistakes this president is making will have to come and make them. And rectifying, correcting constitutional and legal mistakes comes at a huge cost. And we can avoid this cost by making sure that everything is done in accordance with the law. But to make the point clear, all this I've told you is to show that the Honorable Chavinga is actually working in collaboration with the Republican president. You even heard him say his PF is in league or is in an alliance with the UPND, that they're not going to present a candidate as Patriotic Front. Now, frankly speaking, this clearly shows that Registry of Societies, or rather ECZ, will not accept any nomination signed by anybody, including a genuine Secretary General for the PF, if Chavinga is sitting in the office in the position where he's sitting right now. And even after the decision of the High Court, that says Miles Sampa is the president, you heard what Chavinga was saying. He says, look, so far as I'm concerned, I'm still the president. So how can you not say that there's no collaboration rather between him and the sitting president, between him and the UPN?
Has Miles Sampa, you mentioned that when he came back to his senses, it seems like everything started to make a bit more sense. But has he ever come out to say that, in fact, it is true that he himself was also working with the UPND?
Well, Miles has never declared that. But also, if you saw in the formative year, months before Miles at that conference, there were a couple of showings of him and the president in the same place. But you see, possibly, they must have had some kind of discussion that had a bearing on how they were going to hold that convention, etc., etc. But quite frankly, in fairness to Miles, from the time he became the president of PF by that dubious convention, he was trying to assert a position of an opposition president. Okay, he never willingly supported the president of the government. In fact, he even charged Chavinga to say, go out there and be a critic of the president. Don't be a sweet boy or a sweet guy to the president, because your role as leader of opposition in parliament is to offer credible checks and balances, which Chavinga, unfortunately, from day one has never done. So in fairness to Miles at least has tried to show some semblance of opposition to the government.
Now, I'd like to go back to Makebi Zulu, who has been recognized now under PF amongst the alliance as one to take up leadership. And one of the things that many are asking is that with him coming in here, does this simply decimate the chances of Brian Mundubile's presidential aspirations for the 2026 general election?
I don't think so. It actually enhances the chances of a Brian Mundubile presidency, because you see, when we had that misunderstanding, I won't call it confusion, but misunderstanding within the Patriotic Front, we chose to remain at the helm of leadership. Okay, we remained within the Patriotic Front, but also playing our role in the Tonse Alliance. But after this convention, it has now become very clear that really we were not the ones who were causing that confusion. There are other factors that cause that confusion. But Makebi has emerged as a leader from that grouping. And if you've heard, the first call people have made is that Makebi Zulu must come and speak to his brother. And for me, I consider that a very good gesture from the Zambians. I wouldn't want to be the one to say who between the two should be the president, because then I'll be jeopardizing the chances of speaking to each other. What I would just voice out is that, like everybody else, I want to join those who are saying, let's get together, let's sit with each other, let's create a platform on which we can create leadership that shows who's going to lead and who's going to lead. It is very clear when you go into the support base of the Patriotic Front who they would like to be the front runner. But I wouldn't want to jeopardize those chances by saying X and Y becomes the president. But the reality is that the answer to your question rather is that I don't think by any minute that the arrival of Makebi on the presidential bid through that convention diminishes the chances of Brian Mundubile getting the president. Brian is the most feared, presidential candidate right now in the country. We've seen what is going on with him by the UPND government and the police and everybody else. It's because he has asserted himself, he has positioned himself as a front runner amongst the opposition political leaders.
Right. You don't think that what is currently happening with Brian Mundubile is based off of what he had said a couple of weeks ago, him daring the law enforcers to investigate him? Isn't this, just being considered as his fault based off of just that now we are seeing this a couple of weeks later coming up?
Well, I wouldn't call what he said a dare. Really, I mean, he didn't come out there and just deliberately say, look, I dare you come out. No. I think for him, he just presented himself as an alternative and started making preparations to work as an alternative, okay? But what he then started seeing was a growing fear, especially amongst the UPND and its supporters, of the candidature of this individual. My young brother, Cornelius Mwetwa, even had the audacity of dating the press to make a declaration that he would like to see Brian investigated, and arrested, allegedly for crimes that were mentioned by Kambwili. Even after Kambwili himself had said, look, I was just making that statement in jest. I had no basis for saying it. But Cornelius had picked up that baton like a relay and started saying himself to the listening of the whole nation that he would like to see the time Brian is going to be investigated. In fact, he was blasting the law enforcement agencies, why haven't you moved on this individual, instructing them as he did to arrest Brian. So Brian came up and said, look, if there's something they would like to investigate, I would like them to investigate. Because an investigation produces either a positive or a negative result. Okay, a person who speaks the way Brian Mundubile spoke at that time, speaks because he knows that he has got a clean sheet. And quite frankly, the first arrest that we saw happen at the airport was a maddening experience, because the gentleman was just traveling like any other person was traveling. But now it's become a culture in this country that if you're an opposition president, you can't travel out of the country unless some authority is given somewhere. You see, they stopped him, they put him off the plane, they had him arrested, had him spend the night in custody. When we heard the charges, they were laughable. Okay, I mean, everybody raised issues about those charges. And suddenly they thought, oh, let's do a second batch of the charges, because they definitely would like to load on these things on him.
So the police were not right to do something of that nature?
What they did that time was very wrong. He's a citizen.
In what context?
They actually violated his right. Freedom of movement is guaranteed by the Constitution. You can only stop somebody when you think he has committed an offense and you've got evidence. This president is on record, the Republican president is on record having said, you must first investigate and have evidence before you arrest somebody. I'll tell you the truth, when we took Brian Mundubile to, first at the airport, they questioned him for 4 hours, did not find anything. They surrendered him to the police. We brought him to Abexiu police station. We were at Abexiu police station until 01. We arrived there at 1740 something. Until 01 in the morning, they could not come up with a charge against Brian Mundubile. At Abexiu police station, they kept us there up to 01. They could not come up with any charge against him. And like I said, the junior officers were even suggesting to us that maybe you can go home with him and then come back the following day so that you can continue with this investigation. That's what's supposed to actually happen. If you don't have a charge against a suspect and the suspect is represented by lawyers, on the basis of lawyers' undertaking, you can allow the suspect to go back home so that he can be presented the following day by the lawyers. So
what about the charge of aiding and abetting?
It came the following day if you followed. It came after he had been deposited in custody, he spent the night. So I was making the point that it's contrary to procedure that is known under the CPC and under the police guidelines, regulations rather. They kept him in custody for the night without charging him. They came and charged him the following day with that offense. That was wrong. But see, it shows clearly that this has nothing to do with the criminal justice system. This has everything to do with a quest to intimidate him and keep him confined, for the time that they would like to do it. That was definitely wrong. His rights were violated. The same story you would say about the ACC. I think you had a question about what happened at the ACC. Okay, so, the issue about ACC, these matters have been investigated before. These matters have been brought to the public before. People have cried out, including the Republican president himself. There was one time I think he was addressing Parliament on some other institution where he said that they had evidence that some of the senior leaders in the Patriotic Front when they were in government were delivering air, to the government. Or rather, they were getting contracts and getting money without delivering. And because that was also targeted at some senior leaders, including Brian Mundubile. So fortunately, there was an audit that was undertaken, okay, an inquisition was undertaken, and that inquisition established that actually the companies with which Honorable Mundubile is associated were some of the best companies when it came to road contracts in the country. And that in regard to that particular issue of supplying air to the government, as the president had declared, it was found that for his companies, in fact, it is the government that owed them money, because all the work for which they had been contracted had been delivered. And when there was a query of who owed who money between government and their companies, and a forensic audit was sanctioned, and on different accounts that were held by the company. The forensic audits were sanctioned, they were carried out, there were reports supplied, including closing the forensic audit using a final account. And the final account showed that, in fact, it's the companies which were owed money by the government. But of course, this government is not in the tradition of paying you if they don't, for lack of a better term, know you, or if they think you are from the opposition, they will never pay you. Not only that, but there are also several other Zambian contractors who are owed a lot of money by this government who are not being paid for reasons that only somebody from government can come and explain. And that's why when I made that statement on behalf of the President Mundubile, I said I would encourage the ACC to take this matter up, but also do it in the right way. Okay, because the audit reports are available and the final accounts are available.
So you think that the way it was done was not correct?
Even that, of course, was not correct.
I mean, he was summoned to go to the
He had been there before. He had even
Commission.
given a statement before. You see, SEC has a way in which they carry out these investigations. They called all his collaborating partners within those companies, and he got statements from all of them. The matters would have rested there because it was proved in those statements that were given that actually there was nothing owing. But see, because in my assessment, now I'm giving my assessment, because the showing at Ibexio and at the airport turned out very poorly for whoever it concerns, they felt, let's try and find something that we can rub on him as well.
You think this is just not a mere coincidence?
This is basically witch hunting, like I said before. This is basically witch hunting, but it happens in Zambia, and this is a culture that we probably think we need to get to a stage where this culture is buried. You can't have a scenario where every time somebody stands up and said, look, I think I'm a Zambian, I've read the Constitution, I think I qualify to be either a member of parliament, a councillor, or even the president. That should not instigate the government to begin to bring about inquisitions about issues that have already been resolved and closed. But they're doing it purely because, firstly, they want to intimidate the individual, but secondly, they want to create a narrative in the public that is judging that this individual wants to become a president is actually not a clean fellow. Now, for them, they're cleaning Honorable Mundubile by doing that, because some people may have had these views that maybe he did road contracts which he didn't complete and he took the money. But by putting him through this process, quite frankly, they're literally helping us to explain to the public that this gentleman is just as clean as any other person that would like to contest these elections.
What do you think this then will do to his leadership? Because many are questioning his credibility. Yes, you've explained it in this regard, but this matter is coming from a time when the Patriotic Front was in government at the time, and many would also question some of the financial decisions that the PF would make. At that time, in fact, corruption was at its highest.
Yes, well, it allegedly was at its highest. It's actually at its highest right now. If you compare to what we were doing under Patriotic Front, you should be following the FIC reports that are very, very clear about it.
I have been following, yes, but I'm specifically talking about that time.
Yes, that's right.
And for that, we'll talk about this a little later on the show. But let's talk about what's happening here and how this affects the credibility
of course, the perception that the PF government was corrupt was lauded by the UPND. They actually used it as a rallying point in their campaign by branding what PF was doing all black, okay? But what PF was doing even now is very visible. But if you zero it down to individuals, I'm not saying that others were not corrupt. There may have been other people that were corrupt. But let's talk about the case of Brian Mundubile, with this particular case that I've taken to ACC, where it has been clearly demonstrated that this is really just a witch hunt, because this gentleman has explained himself before. The ACC is aware. The Ministry of Local Government, and the RD, who were his major contractors, are aware of how these contracts were contracted, how the monies were paid, and how the works were done, and what is outstanding on the account. All these are facts that can be brought to the surface. My worry is this, that when somebody presents themselves to become a president or an MP in the country, it should not instigate those who are in power to begin to push them back by bringing out issues that can even not be justified. If it can be justified, bring it on. That's why people were thinking, oh, maybe Brian Mundubile was daring them by saying if they want to investigate. It's simply because he had started becoming fed up with the fact that the issue that he had explained before, in fact, the issue on which his companies are suffering financially is the one they want to flip now and suggest that it's actually him who owes the money when it's them supposed to be owing the money.
Well, many are really still speaking more about this road contract that it was costing over 1 billion kwacha. What does this really say about what was happening with the Patriotic Front at that time, especially now that it does come up? Is the ACC wrong to bring it up to investigate? To investigate it?
I don't understand your question. I mean, 15 billion kwacha might look like a big amount of money, but if you know what goes into constructing a road, you would tell that some of those figures that are being thrown around are drops in the ocean. Okay, but the question you must ask and answer is, was that road costed properly at 15 million kwacha or 15 billion kwacha? If your answer is yes, go into the works that were done now. Were those works the actual cost that were supposed to have been done? And this is what the forensic audit has done. And this is what the final accounts has established. That's why there's even an amount now owing to him instead of, as they are alleging,
but
amount owing to them.
This road was not done. The works were not done.
But I've just explained to you what he told them. And of course, if you want to verify further, since you're a journalist, look for the forensic audits for these accounts. The company is Build Trust Construction Limited and the Omni Contractors. These are two companies. Find out the work that they did and find out if the forensic audit was done and find out if the final accounts were rendered, and if they are rendered, what was the net and who was owed the amount of money. You see, the problem is when politicians sensationalize these issues by giving you figures that comes as a shock. Of course, a figure comes as a shocker to a Zambian journalist, or even to myself sometimes. Thinking of 15 billion is a lot of money. But if you go and look at the actual road that was done, it will tell you exactly what it is. Look at this.
We're pressed for time, but I'd like to speak into your political aspirations and the concern that comes up around you being Member of Parliament for Lukashya constituency.
Yes.
And do you wish to continue to take up this seat come 2026, 13th of August? Are you going to be standing?
Yes, I've done a very exciting and challenging period for the past 5 years, being Member of Parliament for Lukashya constituency. If you remember, I actually went in before the next election, so I've actually served about 7 years. But the people of Lukashya and I have developed a relationship that I think I need to exploit again. I'm going to contest the next election, whether or not there's going to be delimitation. But you must also know that out of Lukashya constituency now, another constituency is going to be created. But the Lukashya constituency will remain, and my plan is to remain within the Lukashya enclave, because that's where most of the people that I work with are. They are very excited with the work we've done. They are aware that we've worked under some of the most difficult circumstances, but we've still been able to deliver. They are also aware that we are in the cream team that is trying to put together the new leadership of this government in the name of Tonse Alliance. And we are thinking that if we can campaign on that platform and our candidate takes the day, which we expect is going to take the day, then we're going to be back in government. So yes, I intend to contest the Lukashya constituency election.
Do you think the Patriotic Front is still popular on ground? And my question is based off of one thing, that the last couple of weeks we have seen a number of individuals defecting from the Patriotic Front and joining the UPND, the likes of the Mansa mayor, the Kitwe mayor, these individuals who were considered quite strong during the 2021 general election, and them moving now away from the PF. Isn't this a sign that the Patriotic Front is sort of losing momentum? I'm
glad you use the term that the people that are actually defecting are individuals, not members of the party. Okay? The Patriotic Front is the most organized political organization in the country right now. You can imagine, even with the kind of confusion that the government has caused for the Patriotic Front to be taking place for the past 4 years, look at how well organized the people are. It was very easy for us to campaign for Brian Mundubile using the structures of Patriotic Front, because we told them this is a project that has been created and it was the truth. President Edgar Lungu created this platform of Tonse Alliance. It went and grabbed the structures in the Patriotic Front. And I must tell you this in politics. Mr. Chisanga is only as popular in Lukashya as the people who support him consider him to be. Okay, so no individual who defects today can tell you that because of defected they are going to stand. They are more popular. In fact, you should mark these words. Most of these individuals who are seeing who are defecting now at the 11th hour are definitely not going to even be adopted by the UPND. But if peradventure they are actually adopted and allowed to contest, they will be very bruised. Those will be the very easy constituencies and the mayoral positions for the opposition to go and grab. Because Zambians have judged these individuals, they know that they are being pushed not by a national agenda, but they're being pushed by a personal agenda. Now, when you get to a stage where a country has such huge problems, people respect those who identify themselves with the national agenda, as opposed to those who identify themselves with the personal agenda. Zambians have seen that the UPND has lamentably failed to manage the affairs of the nation. Zambians have seen that the UPND has mortgaged the country to international capital interests in terms of mining, in terms of electricity, etc., etc. Zambians have seen that the UPND has run the most selfish regime in this country since they came into power. Zambians have seen that this country is much more regionally and ethnically disjointed currently under the UPND government than it has been ever before in the past. These are issues that become topical when we get to the election. Zambians would like to get their economy back.
So you think there's nothing that the UPND has done?
Absolutely nothing. This government,
the likes of bringing back the school feeding program.
This government is lamentably failed.
The free education policy.
This government has lamentably
meal
failed.
allowances.
Don't look at the free education without looking at the quality of education that comes from there.
Well, they have been employing teachers the last couple of years, but
I'm a member of Parliament in the constituency. I can tell you.
When was the last time a teacher recruitment exercise?
You don't follow events.
I have been following events.
The Minister of Education, the former Minister of Education under the Patriotic Front, okay, one time mentioned in Parliament that the number of teachers who were recruited by the Patriotic Front during the tenure in office far outnumbers the number of teachers that the UPND has recruited right now. And you must understand this. Let me make the point. You must understand this. That at the time that Patriotic Front was even employed, there were no school infrastructure, because the majority of the work that PF was doing was to construct educational infrastructure. So even when they were doing that, they were still recruiting. So an explanation was given on the floor of the House, and the UPND appreciated the fact that this is nothing compared to what the Patriotic Front actually did. The problem that UPND has done, they blow the small things that they do, to an extent where people begin to think, oh, it is working.
Well, while we criticize them, I think it's also good to bring the good things out.
But like I told you, when you must criticize using comparisons. You must have a comparator. My comparator on education is that Patriotic Front put up school infrastructure.
How many teachers and
I wouldn't have the figures, but there were more than 30,000 over the period of 7 years. I wouldn't have the figure right now. But if you were listening to Parliament the time the minister was actually giving that analysis, it was on the floor of the House where the minister was saying, look, you should be comparing things using facts, because even when the Patriotic Front was busy constructing schools, teachers were being recruited. The Minister of Health, also made the same statement that even health personnel were being recruited over a period of time. Yes, UPND came and said we're going to employ a lot of teachers. You know why they did that? Because when they got into power, they found that the Patriotic Front had constructed sufficient school infrastructure around the country. And these teachers could be recruited only because these structures were already in place.
That's granted, but yes. I'm talking about the positives. While we are criticizing the UPND,
you need to help me to establish.
Credible that the UPND
I'm trying to be as objective as I can be, quite frankly. I don't see anything progressive that the UPND has done. Absolutely nothing. I don't want, I'm a Christian, I shouldn't lie. I don't see anything that the UPND has done. Nothing can say this is positive. Even this issue of cadres, it's just perception. They've just told you, oh, no, cadreism ended.
Where is cadreism happening currently?
Unfortunately, go to Soweto Market right now, go and see what has happened. The UPND has taken over Soweto Market. Come to Intercity bus terminus here, see what's happening.
People are being beaten up?
You don't have to beat people if you create an environment where people begin to fear.
That was the people's concern, that they were being beaten up.
People are not being beaten up. That's a perception that UPND gave you. People were just being interfered with by cadres.
We did see it.
I drive on Estalungu Road every day when coming from Chisanga coming to town. I can show you 3 posts of bus stations where cadres have taken over those bus stations. Minibus drivers are beaten if they don't pay them money. I've raised this before, and people just don't pay attention to it. Something has happened to the Zambians where the mess that UPF was doing was very visible at that time. But now the mess that UPND is doing is not visible. You know what has happened? Zambians have resigned to their fate. Zambians have become very angry that a government they put into power, hoping that can change things from what they were like under the Patriotic Front, has done worse atrocities than the Patriotic Front had actually done.
What has changed under the Patriotic Front that you want to get into government so badly? Because you are kicked out for a number of reasons, but this time around you seem to want to really... Are
you sympathetic with the Zambian people?
I'm here to ask you
I'm a member of Parliament in Lukashya. Let me answer that question.
What has changed under the Patriotic Front?
Please listen to me now very carefully. I'm a member of Parliament in Lukashya constituency, where the time we were in government, people used to get 8 bags of fertilizer each in a group of about 20 people. 8 packs, 8 below, 8 beso, 8 urea. Every year, every farming season, they had production. Right now, if you go to Lukashya constituency, it's a crime shame if you see how many people are accessing fertilizer in that constituency. But even without that, people have soldiered on, they're still producing, okay? The UPND campaigned under the platform that they're going to reduce the cost of energy in the country. You just go and buy electricity right now and tell me how much it costs you. Go and buy fuel right now and tell how much it costs you. The UPND was talking about reducing the price of minimum. Go and buy minimum right now and tell me what it costs you. Okay? Even when they're talking about free education, you should also look at other interrelated factors. A child who has to go to school and spends more money on fuel, he cannot be deemed to be enjoying free education. You have just transferred the cost center from paying school fees to paying a minibus driver. Okay? Add to that, look at how regionally polarized the country has become now. All these are negatives, and this is why we think that we need to get back. You see, when people make a mistake, you have to go back. I'll tell you the major difference between the UPND and the Patriotic Front, which is why Zambians are thinking PF, even in its transformed form, must come back. Okay? The UPND is an elitist political party. The UPND thinks they are here to do the bidding for those who come and invest in our country. And for them, their argument is that as long as they come and invest here, as long as they can employ people, we are okay. Every other country is moving from that to a different pedestal. Every country in the world is now beginning to think there must be what is called the principle of shared value. That if you come to invest in my country, I should also have some sufficient value of the fact that I am endowed with this natural resource which you are coming to exploit. Look at what Duma is doing in Botswana, just next door here. Okay, he has gone into a fight with investors to show them that even the Tswanas must begin to benefit. Go to Tanzania in the graphite mines there. Go and see how the presidents, starting from Magufuli, including the one who's there, Saluf now, they will tell you how they are allowing these investors to come and invest in their mining investors. Out of the money that they are getting, these people are transforming the economy. You go to Tanzania now, we've got one of the biggest hydropower stations that was constructed, Julius Mwalimu Nyerere hydropower station. Right now, we're about to start buying power from them. You know where that money came from? They came from enforcing the principle of shared value between investors in the graphite and Tanzanite mines
and this is
and
what
the
the PF
locals.
wants to do.
We had even started doing that. Edgar Chagolungu had even started an agenda of making sure that we take what is called an equitable value in the investment in the mines. And we think that this is a missed opportunity because when UPND came in, they found the mines. KCM was with us. Mopane had been given to us. These mines should have actually been just empowered using local resources, and they would have been competing with the mines in Northwestern Province. But no, the UPND, being a capitalistic party, decided to give the mines back to the foreigners, even when they said they're not going to do it. UPND would lie to you in the morning and do something else in the afternoons. So now time has come for us to take stock as Zambians. Do we want to go ahead with this party that has no idea where they're taking the country forward, and the only thing they're going to do is sit back and ensure the investors that everything is fine in the country, bring your investment, which is why the first thing they did is go to the IMF project. We can't continue doing things that have never worked elsewhere. We should try things that have worked somewhere. I've actually been arguing that right now we've got two examples we can compare with. If we want to go to the extreme, okay, we can go and see Burkina Faso. What Traore has done to Burkina Faso, if you want to go to the extreme. But if we consider ourselves mature and democratic, and also because we are an Anglophone country, okay, former colony of the UK, Ghana can give you a very perfect example. Mahama was just here, he came and told us exactly how they achieved what they've achieved in Ghana. Why can't we go and try and replicate that? Just to ensure that we increase, the value of life in this country by making sure that whoever comes to invest here comes and invests on the principle of shared value. Not only Ghana, Botswana is doing the same thing, Tanzania is doing the same thing. Across in Latin America, countries like Mexico are also doing the same thing, which is why America has become very frightened now. And they've started using Big Brother theory to go and grab a president from another country and arrest him, just because they want to make sure they get access to these resources. Recently, there was a very scary statement that Americans made, that they're going to remove the support for AIDS and HIV from Zambia unless we can pawn our minerals to them. This is how brazen the geoeconomic politics have become worldwide. But you need intelligent people, you need patriotic people, you need nationalists who can stand up to these people and tell them, we also have people in Chandamkulu village in Lukashya constituency who own this resource. Please make sure that when you come and invest, we can also put another hospital in Kasama, or we can put a university in Kasama or elsewhere, because we need to continue getting value. You see, these assets are depleting, these resources are depleting. We need to be able to transform the value of these resources into something that our children and their children can come and look at and say, okay, our parents were leading, this is what they left for us. At that time, because of the advancement in knowledge, believe it or not, we can begin to compete, even with the whites, on the same platform. But if we're going to continue playing these games, believe it or not, we'll remain in this squalor that we're in so far.
Honorable George Chisanga, Lukashya Member of Parliament, we'll have to leave it at that, but thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so delighted to be given the opportunity to come and speak to you. And, you know, these are issues that lie at the heart of every leader who wants to make sure that he participates in the political process to try and transform the country. I was saying, and I want to end with these words, you know, that look, the UPND may have its own style of how they would like to lead this nation. But they must give room for some of us, including Brian Mundubile, who have got a different and alternative style of how we would like to come and lead this country, to compete on the same platform. And Zambians make a correct, an informed decision who they would like to be. I said that if Zambians are happy with what UPND has done so far, they should not be afraid. They'll be voted for. But if Zambians are unhappy with what UPND has done, they should be ready to pass that baton to whoever Zambians are going to say, okay, give a chance to your colleagues. They can also run us for the next 5 years to make sure that this country becomes better than what we're seeing is right now.
Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful. Thank you very much.